We find ourselves in the kingdom of Helmuth. Helmuth was a prosperous kingdom but is now terrorized by the demon lords. Vermouth and his 4 comrades seek to rid the world of their destruction. Their objective is to defeat all the demon lords, and they have already defeated 3. The 5 heroes broke into the palace. Vermouth, a skilled swordsman, kept a watchful eye on their surroundings, ready for any dangers that may come their way. As they neared the demon lord Liar, the goblin guards pounced, their weapons drawn. Vermouth instantly dodged their blows, his sword flashing through the air. The Great Vermouth. The Wise Senya. While the priestess called forth a stream of healing magic to keep their companions on their feet. A large goblin attacked her. She attacked the goblins with brutal efficiency, her calm face betraying nothing. The faithful Anissa. The giant man, however, was not so fortunate. The goblins soon had him surrounded, but that was not in their favor. With one blow, tens of goblins were slain. The brave Molin. The other swordsmen rushed past Molin. His scars reveal his reckless fighting style. Rushing to reach Vermouth, with quick, swift swings. All the goblins were on the floor. The foolish Hamel. Hamel shouted out to Vermouth. A surprise attack was headed Vermouth's way. With no time for Vermouth to dodge the attack, he found that Hamel shielded him. Hamel was constantly running ahead of Vermouth. He kept this up even when they reached the crossroad leading to the Demon King's castle. Vermouth swiftly attacked the demon lord. The rest of the heroes rushed to Hamel. Nothing could be done to save Hamel's life. His last wish to Vermouth is to avenge him and kill the last demon lord. Vermouth, make sure to defeat the demon king. Vermouth swore an oath on Hamel's tears that he would definitely defeat the demon king. Hamel regretted the way he acted with his companions. In his final moments, while cradled in the arms of his loving comrades,
I could barely squeeze out these words. A gaping hole was running through my chest. To treat my injury, they were desperately casting magic and pouring out drops of the precious elixir, but it was pointless. My voice wasn't coming out the way I wanted it to. It was likely due to the blood rising up in my throat.
Anise, please pray for me. Molin, you're the bravest warrior.
She's crying. I never expected a girl like her to make that sort of expression for me. I don't need the elixir. You don't have enough to waste one here. Don't be foolish. Everything in front of me was growing darker.
In Hamel's final moments he heard Senya say, if you're going to say it, why didn't you say it sooner? Still, it made me feel good. After all, this was the first time I'd ever heard him say that.
Wah! I never said I like you to Senya.
The 10-year-old Eugene clenched his fists tightly. He might have already read this story hundreds of times, but each time he reached this point in the story, rage welled up within him.
All the others get called great, wise, faithful, or brave. So why am I the only one who gets called stupid?
With a furrowed brow, Eugene closed the book.
Even that blockhead Molin got packaged as the brave one. So why am I the stupid one? Did the two of us get switched at some point? No matter how much he racked his brain, he couldn't understand how they had come up with the brave Molin. The brave? They don't know jack about him. More like, the moron Molin.
Anise, please pray for me.
I didn't say that.
Molin, you're the bravest warrior. Senya, he said, I've always liked you.
I didn't like her. The bastard who wrote this must have been someone who I beat up in the past. Eugene spat out as he ground his teeth in anger.
Actually, it wasn't that difficult to understand why the contents of the story were like this. These bedtime stories were aimed at children, so they needed to be easy to read as well as fun and educational.
So my character was sacrificed for the sake of a good bedtime story. Fuck. Did they really have to sell my good name for such a cheap lesson?
After all, it wasn't like they could have expected that Hamel would be reincarnated with a complete memory of his past life.
Damn reincarnation. I'm fine with reincarnation, but why'd I have to get reborn as one of Vermouth's descendants?
Vermouth's surname was Lionheart.
If I'm going to get reincarnated, Aren't there a lot of places that I could have gone to? So why, of all things, did I get stuck with Vermouth's bloodline?
Anyone else might have celebrated having such a powerful background, but there was no way that Eugene, who still had the memories of his
Wasn't someone who seemed overly interested in women, but I guess he changed with age.
only the descendants of the legal wife were recognized as the direct lineage of Vermouth. Although Eugene's family was also surnamed Lionheart, they were from the indirect branch. Although it might not be much compared to the main estate in the capital, Eugene's family mansion was lavish enough to seem showy in its rural surroundings. So even though they were just indirect descendants, they were still being treated according to their station. Descendants who inherited the blood of the great Vermouth were not allowed to neglect their training. These words had been hammered into Eugene from a young age. Not again. Gerhard just stared at his son, unable to find the words. He noticed that his son now had such a hardened physique. It was hard to believe he was just 10. Be honest, if they fought barehanded, he suspected that he might even lose. His young son had already put all his father's past efforts to shame. Although he might also be a descendant of the great Vermouth, Gerhard actually had no talent for the martial arts. It really did break. Whenever he saw his son, he couldn't help but feel mixed emotions. From Eugene's behavior, which wasn't like a child's, to his sharp eyes that didn't hold a shred of innocence, Gerhard felt there was always some distance between them. Even though Eugene had lost his mother when he was young, Gerhard had never once seen his son cry out for his dead wife. And that wasn't all. His son's talent was great. So great that it was hard to believe that they shared the same blood. He's a monster. Although this wasn't an appropriate thought to have about his only son, Gerhard couldn't help but feel fear at times.
I was just swinging it, and it broke.
How long had it been since the dummy was last replaced? Around 3 days?
The village blacksmith's skills are garbage. He should be summoned and given a beating, but father, you are just too merciful.
Although these words were too harsh to come from a child's mouth, Gerhard didn't bother to point this out. Bloodline continuation ceremony was a Lionheart family tradition that took place once every 10 years. During the ceremony, all children from the ages of 10 to 15 who bore the name Lionheart, both direct and indirect descendants, were called to the main estate. The reason for this ceremony was simple. It was to decide who among them were best suited to carry the Lionheart name. After all, wasn't it an embarrassment to claim to be the descendants of the hero without first proving it? So until that day, the indirect descendants weren't allowed to wield a sharpened true weapon. What a stupid tradition. The children of the direct line residing in the capital estate were free to wield any weapon they wanted, regardless of their age. And they started learning how to use mana as soon as they could walk. Eugene is incredibly talented. His father feels guilty for not possessing talent. If only he was born to the direct line, it was an indisputable fact that, as a father, he was lacking in influence.
Why do you have that sort of look on your face?
No, it's nothing.
As if. You can clearly tell that he's blaming himself again for not being able to give me the best opportunities.
Such a reality made Gerhard feel tormented. If only he had been born without talent like his father. Then Eugene wouldn't have to feel the gap between his innate talent and the challenges posed by reality. Eugene, whatever you do, don't try to compete with the children of the main house. No matter how excellent you are, you won't be an adversary for the children of the direct bloodline. There will be 3 children from the direct line and 6 from the branch who are the competitors. The direct line children will be the son from the first wife, and the other 2 will be the twins from the second wife. 2 of the branches have a relatively larger authority, the others are trash. I truly believed that I was a genius. I did have enough talent to allow for such a misguided belief. In the end, I was forced to accept the reality that I had tried so hard to reject. I wasn't a genius was all thanks to meeting a surreal genius, one who I couldn't even compare to. That I was finally forced out of this ridiculous and childish delusion. The me who thought I was a genius was but a frog in a well. Inside the comfort of my little well, I had gotten drunk on a false sense of superiority. I hated that genius. I was jealous I can't be as great as Vermouth. I said that Vermouth is my rival. Although no one else actually agreed with this, Eugene rid himself of the idea. His past life belonged in the past. Since he had been reincarnated like this, why bother with the regrets of his previous life? After returning to his homeland in the Kiel Empire, the great Vermouth served as a duke before eventually returning the title. He was praised as a hero until the very end. As for the wise Sienna, that uncute girl was invited to the magic kingdom of Arath, where she became the youngest person in history to rise to the position of a magic tower's head wizard. The faithful Anise, that rotten woman, had actually ended up being canonized as a saint by the Holy Empire of Eurus. Her teachings were so respected that they were even being passed down as a separate volume of scripture. And Eugene just couldn't believe what the brave Molin was said to have done. It was claimed that Molin, that blockhead, had actually founded a kingdom. But he really managed to gather all the refugees from the lands that had been ravaged by the Demon King's forces and establish a kingdom. It seems like everyone was doing just fine until they died. So why are the demons still around? In his past life as Hamel, he and his companions had ventured into the Devildom of Helmuth. He clearly remembered that, at the moment of his death, he had believed that Vermouth and his other companions would definitely slay the remaining demon kings. However, how were things in reality? The world was at peace, of course. The demon kings no longer held any ambitions of conquering the world, and it was all due to the oath that the great Vermouth had made with the demon kings. Why did he end up making an oath like that? Weren't we supposed to wipe them all out? He didn't know the reasons behind it. But in any case, the war with the demon kings was over, and the world was at peace. Perchance, are you feeling a bit nervous? I understand how you feel. The man sympathized with Eugene. The man's name was Gordon. He was a knight who had sworn allegiance to the main house of Lionheart, and he was currently serving as Eugene's escort. Master Eugene, would you mind if I give you a piece of advice?
Sure.
If you're already feeling nervous, then every day spent at the main estate will feel extremely tortuous.
Thank you for your advice, Sir Gordon.
Without dropping his smile, Eugene turned back to stare out the window. And now the carriage was leaving the city behind and entering a forest. From this point on, we have entered the Lionheart estate. The forest was surrounded by tall walls. But there's no need to be in a hurry to get your things ready. We still have a long way to go from here. I get it. You bastard. Must be nice to have such a large estate. It's not even your land, so why are you acting so smug?
Whoa, so this whole forest is the private property of the main house?
Yep.
If it's this large, isn't it inconvenient getting around?
There are warp gates installed everywhere.
Then why am I currently riding in a carriage?
Eugene thought to himself.
Is that so?
We couldn't even be bothered to give Master Eugene permission to use the warp gates. Gordon walked over to open the door for Eugene. Welcome to the Lionheart family's main estate, Gordon said politely, with a bow of his head. The Lionheart. Eugene slowly raised his gaze. White flags lined the path leading up from the main gate entrance, and a brave lion was embroidered in the center of each flag. This was the personal sigil of the main house. Vermouth's Lionheart. Eugene looked down at his own chest. His clothes were bare of any decoration. Only Vermouth Lionheart's direct descendants were allowed to have the lion sigil sewn onto their left chest.
Have any of my other relatives arrived yet?
Master Eugene is the first to arrive. He found that a single personal attendant had been assigned to him. The female servant greeted him. Please call me Nina. Though from the looks of it, she was a young girl who wasn't much older than Eugene. Eugene couldn't muster up much dissatisfaction for this. If there is anything you need, please ring this bell, Nina said as she bowed her head and handed Eugene a small bell. She was probably in her late teens, at the very most. Why did they assign him a maid who was fresh out of her apprenticeship? Wasn't it obvious? If he were to take his frustrations out on her when the clumsy attendant made a mistake or caused disrespect, he'd be setting himself up to be punished instead.
So you're saying that I'm going to be living with some other relatives?
Yes.
Do you know when they'll be arriving?
They all should arrive within 4 days at the very latest. So I am stuck here for 4 days.
Is there a gymnasium around the back?
Yes.
Do I need permission from the main house to practice my swings with a wooden sword?
That's,
Because that's just what I'm going to do.
With a helpless look on her face, Nina trailed behind Eugene. Two children giggled mockingly as they gossiped about the new arrival. These two were Cyan and Seal, fraternal twins born to the second wife of the main house. Though their mother was the second wife, it was no secret that the patriarch favored her over the official first wife. That bastard's name is. Heard it's Eugene and that he's the same age as us. I heard that this is his first time in the capital. Since that brat came here from the countryside, then his body must reek of manure. In my opinion, he's probably lifted more pitchforks in his entire life than wooden swords, said Cyan scornfully. Seal exclaimed in enlightenment. Since he rode in the carriage for a few days, the smell clinging to his body must have rubbed off onto the carriage as well. I just so happened to hear that as soon as that brat arrived, he went straight to the gym. What a show-off. Seal burst into laughter. It seems that he must have come to the bloodline continuation ceremony with high expectations of himself. It looks like he wasn't properly educated by his father. Yep, Yep, Seal agreed with her brother. First, he ruins the carriage by getting his smell everywhere, and now he's trying to show off to the adults by pretending to be training. How cheeky of him, Cyan said. Looks like he needs to be punished, said Seal. Let's go. Cyan led the way with a forceful cry. Seal skipped along behind him before turning her head as she felt a gaze observing her from afar. The twins had been practicing mana since their childhood and could sense even intangible things like gazes. A young man stood in a window on the 3rd floor. After exchanging looks with Seal, he leaned back and pulled the curtains shut. Seal smiled bashfully at this sight. To perfectly control his body, Eugene had been training every single day, not wasting even a day lying around. Since he'd gotten a second chance through reincarnation, he had to make the most of his new life. But it wasn't his reason for working this hard. Eugene had been like this from the very beginning. Even when he'd been traveling with Vermouth and his other companions, he never missed a chance to train. Eugene had come to realize that he was pushing his body far harder than he had in his previous life. Each time he pushed himself physically, it felt like his body was breaking through its previously imagined limits. He still couldn't be sure whether the body he had been born with as Vermouth's descendant was superior to Vermouth's own. Nina watched on with an overwhelmed look in her eyes. Eugene was currently wearing a large chainmail vest several sizes too big and sandbags hanging from each arm. But on top of that, even more sandbags were being hung onto the spear. There's no way. Just from the looks of it, the spear alone had to be double Eugene's own weight. The spear was heavier than him. Eugene kept swinging the spear fiercely. Nina covered her mouth with a gasp. As Nina looked at this scene in awe, she was startled by a voice coming from beside her. What is that bastard doing? It was Cyan and Seal. The evil twins had caused countless maids to soak their pillowcases with tears. The two had crept right next to her. Why, young master, young lady, what brings you here? I asked you what that bastard was doing. Cyan spat out with furrowed brows. He was displeased by the fact that this nameless servant hadn't immediately answered his question. Under the usual circumstances, he would have torn into her so thoroughly that she would never dare make that mistake again. But currently, he was far more curious about what the villager was doing.
Eugene instructed. Can't you tell just by looking?
Taking a deep breath, Eugene stopped and lowered the spear onto the ground.
Do you know what this is? Eugene asked as he kicked the spear.
What was this bastard thinking? Cyan didn't answer immediately and instead narrowed his eyes, but Seal, standing beside him, grinned and answered. You idiot. It's a spear, of course. Don't you even know that?
Then why don't you try and explain to that stupid brother of yours? Tell him, that bastard is swinging a spear.
Seal's eyes widened into circles at this insult. In contrast, Cyan's eyes became even thinner. Me?
Seeing as how you didn't know what was going on when you were looking right at it, you don't seem all that smart.
Brother, that bumpkin is calling you an idiot. Seal giggled and poked Cyan in the side. Rather than being enraged like her brother, she instinctively knew that she could make the situation more interesting by arousing her brother's anger in this way. Cyan cried out, you dare. Cyan wasn't a fool. Of course, he knew that Eugene had been holding a spear and swinging it as a training exercise. However, this was his first time seeing such an unscientific method of training. Wearing a chainmail vest several sizes too big, tying sandbags onto both arms, and swinging a spear that was also laden with sandbags. Could you really call that training? The chainmail vest might be large, seeing the state that it was in. It definitely had to have been made from the cheapest scrap iron. This meant that it couldn't be as heavy as it appeared. As for those sandbags, while they might seem hefty, looking at how they bounced as he moved, you could tell that, despite their thick leather casings, they were mostly empty. Where does he get the nerve, coming here and playing this sort of trick? Though, the fact that his attempt was so transparently fake made it kind of funny. Apologize.
For what?
You dare pretend ignorance? Apologize for insulting my intelligence.
Sorry about that.
However, Cyan wasn't satisfied with this apology. He narrowed his eyes and raised his chin proudly. Lower your head and apologize more respectfully.
Aren't we the same age? You're 13. I'm also 13. That means we're pals of the same age, so why ask me to lower my head?
Cyan's eyes widened as words failed him. As someone who had been constantly indulged ever since he was young, he grew up spoiled and wasn't familiar with this kind of childish quarrel. There's no way that you and I can be friends. You really don't know your place. Just because your last name is Lionheart, do you really think you're one of the same Lionhearts as us?
No, I have a pretty good idea of the difference. I'm from an indirect line, and you're from the direct line. That's your house over there.
You really are impudent, Cyan spat out as he held his nose. Also, there's a stench coming from your body. It's the smell of the manure from the countryside mixed in with your sweat.
I've never gotten close to manure in my entire life.
If so, that just means it's the smell of your own shit. In any case, you just plain stink.
I'll wash up in a bit.
No, go wash up now. Once you're done, go and clean the carriage that you rode in as well.
The carriage?
Because the smell of shit from your body definitely must have rubbed off onto the seat, so I'm telling you to go clean it. Furthermore, you need to bow your head and apologize to me. I still haven't accepted your apologies for calling me an idiot, and for daring to place yourself at my level. Without waiting for Cyan to finish, Eugene turned to Nina and said,
Nina.
Yes.
You're my personal attendant, right?
Yes. Although I am undeserving of this role, I have temporarily been assigned as Master Eugene's personal attendant.
If that's the case, then instead of standing there, melting in the sunlight, go and clean the carriage that I rode in on.
Nina didn't think that Eugene was giving her an unreasonable order. However, Nina couldn't understand why Eugene would give her such an order under the current circumstances. Didn't he realize that one of the devilish twins was standing right in front of him? Eugene's behavior showed an open disregard to Cyan's orders. What do you think you're doing? Cyan burst out.
I'm just getting the carriage cleaned.
I told you to do it yourself.
Why should I when there's someone who'll do it for me?
I was ordering you to clean the carriage.
And who are you to give me orders?
I am Cyan Lionheart.
Okay. And I'm Eugene Lionheart. Nice to meet you.
Reacting to this, Seal's hands rose to cover a broad grin as she giggled in amusement even as Cyan's jaw dropped open foolishly. And I'm Seal Lionheart, Seal introduced herself, still giggling. A rage was stoked in Cyan's chest. As the young master of the main family, once he gave an order, the other person was supposed to follow his command without a protest. So, brother, are you just going to let that slide? Seal leaned against him and fluttered her eyelashes in anticipation. Cyan said, because you keep ignoring my orders. You have looked down on me and insulted me. As such, he picks up a wooden sword from the floor and challenges Eugene to a duel.
Stay tuned for the next episode.